Right, so get this, we're diving deep into the book of Revelation today.
Woo, okay.
Specifically, you sent over this YouTube video titled Mystery, the Book of Revelation.
Okay.
From the Grace Digital Network channel.
Uh-huh.
It's a fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes kind of scary part of the Bible.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most challenging books in the Bible.
Yeah.
But I think what's so captivating about Revelation is how it blends these intense images with these really deep theological ideas. It's not just about predicting the future, but it's about getting a glimpse into this epic struggle between good and evil and understanding God's ultimate power.
And this video doesn't shy away from those apocalyptic prophecies at all.
No, it doesn't.
It really focuses on the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls of God's wrath.
Right.
So we're talking about judgments and plagues, all that good stuff.
Yep, all that.
I'm ready.
For you?
Let's do it.
Okay. But remember, to really grasp what Revelation is trying to tell us, we need to remember the kind of literature it is. Apocalyptic.
Right.
It's full of symbols and metaphors that try to express spiritual truths.
Right.
Not necessarily literal events.
Okay.
It's like a divine code we need to crack.
Okay, so thinking symbolically.
Yeah.
The video starts off with this scroll sealed with 7 seals, and only the Lamb who is Jesus can open them.
Right.
What's the significance of that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The sealed scroll represents God's plan for the end times, and the fact that only Jesus can open it shows his ultimate authority and power.
Right.
Each seal that gets broken reveals another part of this plan.
Okay.
And it's not just random events.
Yeah.
There's a very deliberate narrative that unfolds, building in intensity.
And of course, we can't talk about the 7 seals without mentioning those infamous 4 horsemen.
Right.
It's like one of the most iconic images from Revelation.
Why do you think those horsemen have such a hold on our imaginations?
Even centuries later.
I think it's because they tap into our primal fears about war, famine, disease, and death.
Yeah.
But in Revelation, they're not just these frightening figures.
Right.
They represent aspects of God's judgment being unleashed upon the world.
Okay.
They're like heralds of the coming chaos and suffering.
This first horseman is an interesting one. He rides a white horse and has a bow and crown.
Right.
The video says this represents the Antichrist bringing a deceptive peace. That seems kind of paradoxical. How can peace be deceptive?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
The peace that the Antichrist offers is a false peace.
Okay.
One that ultimately leads to greater conflict and suffering.
Right.
It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Right.
Luring people into a sense of security that will eventually be shattered.
Okay, so not the kind of peace treaty we want to sign.
No.
Then we've got the second horseman on a fiery red horse.
Right.
And he's all about war and bloodshed.
Yeah.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yes. This horseman represents the escalation of conflict and the breakdown of social order. It's a picture of the violence and chaos that will engulf the world as the end times unfold.
And the third horseman rides a black horse and carries a set of scales. What's the deal with the scales?
That's a symbol of famine and economic hardship.
Okay.
The scales represent the way basic necessities like food will become scarce and incredibly expensive.
Right.
It's a picture of the suffering that comes with widespread hunger and poverty.
And finally, we get to the fourth horseman. And I have to admit, this one is the most unsettling.
Yeah.
He rides a pale horse, and his name is Death, with Hades following right behind Chills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This horseman represents widespread death and suffering caused by disease, war, and natural disasters.
Okay.
It's the ultimate consequence of humanity's rebellion against God.
So we've got conquest, war, famine, and death.
Right.
The video also mentions the 5th and 6th seals.
Yeah.
What happens as those seals are broken?
The 5th seal reveals the souls of those who were martyred for their faith.
Ooh.
Crying out for justice, it highlights the persecution that believers will face during the end times. And the 6th seal brings about some truly cataclysmic events.
Okay.
We're talking massive earthquakes, the sun and moon going dark.
Wow.
And stars falling from the sky.
Now that's what I call an apocalypse.
Yeah.
But what I found really intriguing was what happens after the 6th seal. The video talks about this eerie silence in heaven.
Right.
For a full half hour.
Yeah.
That seems so strange. Heaven going quiet. What do you make of that?
It is a strange detail, and it sparked a lot of debate among scholars. Some see it as a moment of reverence for God's impending judgment, while others interpret it as a kind of stunned silence as the full scope of God's plan is revealed.
Maybe it's a bit of both, a moment of awe and terror combined.
Perhaps. It could also be a period of anticipation for the coming trumpet judgments.
Right.
It's like the calm before the storm. Only the storm is made of divine wrath.
All right, so we've got these seals, these horsemen, and this unsettling silence. I'm sensing a pattern here. Things seem to be escalating.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, that brings us to the 7 trumpets.
Okay.
Each heralding a new wave of judgment. Think of it like a cosmic symphony of chaos. Each trumpet blast bringing another layer of devastation to the world.
Oh, boy.
But we'll delve into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've heard about those seals being broken, each one unleashing some pretty intense judgment. Now we're moving into trumpet territory. I'm picturing something like the plagues of Egypt, but on a cosmic scale.
Yeah, it's definitely an escalation. Think of the seals as setting the stage and the trumpets as bringing the drama to a whole new level. Each trumpet blast signals another wave of chaos and destruction.
The video dives into the specifics of each trumpet judgment, but I'm curious about the overall message here. What's the big picture when it comes to these trumpets?
The trumpets show the increasing intensity of God's judgment. It's like a warning siren getting louder and louder, a call for humanity to turn back to God before it's too late.
So these judgments are not just about punishment, but also about getting our attention.
Exactly. They're meant to wake us up to the consequences of our choices and to the reality of the spiritual battle raging around us.
Okay, so let's talk about those trumpets. What kind of calamities are we talking about here?
Well, the first trumpet brings hail and fire mixed with blood raining down, burning up a third of the earth. It's a picture of widespread destruction and chaos.
That's intense. I'm starting to understand why this book has a reputation for being terrifying.
It can be, but remember, it's trying to shake us out of our complacency and make us confront the reality of sin and its consequences. And it doesn't stop there. The second trumpet brings a burning mountain falling into the sea, turning it to blood.
That's straight out of a disaster movie. What's the significance of the sea turning to blood?
The sea represents the vastness and interconnectedness of life on Earth. Turning it to blood symbolizes the corruption and destruction of God's creation as a result of human sin.
So it's not just about physical destruction, but about the contamination of something essential to life.
Precisely then, the third trumpet brings a star called wormwood, which poisons all the freshwater sources. Imagine the impact on humanity with no clean water to drink.
This feels eerily relevant today with growing concerns about pollution and water scarcity. Does Revelation offer a warning about our responsibility to care for the earth?
That's a great observation. I think it definitely challenges us to consider our role in the health of the planet and the potential consequences of our actions. And it's not just about physical resources. The fourth trumpet brings darkness covering a third of the sun, moon, and stars.
So now we're not just talking about physical destruction, but also spiritual darkness.
Right. This darkness represents the spiritual blindness and confusion that will grip the world as it turns away from God. It's like losing our moral compass and wandering aimlessly in a world without light.
Okay, we're 4 trumpets in, and it's already pretty intense, but there are more, right? What happens with the 5th trumpet?
The 5th trumpet unleashes something truly terrifying, demonic locusts from the abyss. And these aren't your average locusts. They have scorpion-like tails and are given power to torment those who don't have God's seal for 5 months.
Demonic locusts. That's a new one. It's like something straight out of a horror movie. What's the symbolism behind these creatures?
Locusts have always been a symbol of devastation and destruction, going back to the plagues of Egypt. But here, they're given an even more sinister twist. They represent the forces of evil that are unleashed upon the world and the intense spiritual warfare that will take place during the end times.
What about the 6th trumpet? What does that one bring?
The 6th trumpet unleashes an army of demonic horsemen who kill a third of humanity. They ride horses with lion heads and tails like serpents breathing fire, smoke, and sulfur.
These descriptions are so vivid and terrifying, it makes you wonder where John got this imagery from.
It's definitely some of the most graphic imagery in the entire Bible, but remember, it's all symbolic. John is trying to convey the immense power and destructiveness of evil and the horrors that will unfold as the world descends further into darkness.
Okay, that's 6 trumpets, each one more devastating than the last, and we're reaching a fever pitch here. What happens when that 7th trumpet blows?
The 7th trumpet is unique. It doesn't bring another plague or calamity. Instead, it signals a major transition. Loud voices in heaven proclaim that the kingdoms of the world have become the kingdom of God and his Christ.
So it's not just about judgment, there's a sense of victory and triumph as well.
Exactly. The seventh trumpet marks a turning point. It signals the beginning of the end for the forces of evil and the establishment of God's ultimate reign.
It's like the final act is about to begin.
It is, but before we move into that final act, the video takes a detour to explore some other crucial concepts related to the end times ideas that help us understand the bigger picture of what's happening in Revelation.
Okay, good. Cool. I need a minute to process all this before we move on to those 7 bowls of wrath, to the grand finale, right?
They are, but before we dive into those, let's talk about this idea of the spirit of the Antichrist, which the video spends some time on. It's a really important concept to grasp if we want to understand the spiritual dynamics at play in Revelation.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly is the spirit of the Antichrist? Is it just another way of talking about the Antichrist himself?
That's a common misconception. The video emphasizes that the spirit of the Antichrist is broader than a single individual. It's more like an ideology, a force that opposes God and his truth in every age.
So it's not about one person, but about a way of thinking, a way of being in the world that rejects God.
Exactly. It's about the spirit of rebellion and deception that has been present throughout history, tempting humanity to turn away from God and embrace falsehood.
So if this spirit of the Antichrist isn't confined to one person, how do we recognize it? What are its identifying marks?
The video highlights several key characteristics to watch out for. First, there's the denial of Jesus as the Messiah. This doesn't necessarily mean outright atheism, but rather a rejection of Jesus' divinity and his saving power.
So it's more about rejecting the core of the Christian faith, the belief that Jesus is the Son of God who came to redeem humanity.
Yes, another hallmark of the spirit is deception, and lies it manifests in spreading false teachings, distorting the truth, and manipulating people for selfish gain.
It's like a cosmic con artist trying to trick us into believing something that's not true.
That's a great analogy, and this deception can operate on a much larger scale than just individual. Lies, the spirit of the Antichrist seeks to undermine truth and morality on a societal level, leading people astray from God's path.
It sounds pretty insidious. What are some other signs we should be aware of?
Well, blasphemy against God is another clear indicator. This includes speaking disrespectfully about God, mocking his word, and promoting ideologies that directly contradict his teachings.
So it's not just about disbelief, but about active opposition to God and his values.
Right. And finally, the spirit of the Antichrist often manifests in the persecution of believers. This can range from intolerance and discrimination to violence directed at those who follow Jesus.
That's a sobering thought. So how does all of this tie back to the Antichrist himself, the actual individual who will appear at the end of time?
The video explains that the beast from Revelation 13 embodies the spirit of the Antichrist. He's not just an evil dictator, but a figure who represents the culmination of all that is opposed to God.
It sounds like the ultimate showdown between good and evil is brewing.
It is, and to understand that battle fully, we need to look at 2 contrasting symbols that the video introduces: the mark of the beast and the seal of God.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the difference between these 2 marks? They sound pretty significant.
The mark of the beast is described as being required for economic participation for buying and selling. It's associated with the worship of the beast and carries the number 666, which is a coded name for him.
So it's like a symbol of allegiance to this evil system, a way of outwardly showing your loyalty to the beast and all he represents.
Precisely, on the other hand, the seal of God is given to God's faithful followers for their protection. It symbolizes their spiritual ownership and belonging to him.
So it's like a mark of protection and loyalty to God, a way of declaring that you stand with him in the midst of this spiritual battle.
Exactly. And this raises a crucial question for all of us. Where do our loyalties lie? Whose mark do we bear, metaphorically speaking? Are we aligning ourselves with the values of the world, or are we standing firm in our faith and obedience to God?
That's a powerful question to consider. I'm starting to see how Revelation isn't just about predicting the future, but about examining our own hearts and choices in the present.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another fascinating group mentioned in the video, the 144,000. They're described as being sealed for protection during the tribulation, a kind of spiritual elite who are set apart for God's purposes.
So who are these 144,000? Are they some kind of super Christians, the only ones who will make it through the end times unscathed?
There are different interpretations. The video suggests that they represent 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, symbolizing the fullness of God's people. They're described as being pure and faithful, standing before God's throne and singing a new song.
That's an interesting image, but there's been a lot of debate about whether the 144,000 are literal or symbolic. What do you think?
It's a complex issue, but regardless of the specific interpretation, the 144,000 represent those who remain faithful to God even amidst intense persecution and tribulation. They stand in stark contrast to those who choose the mark of the beast and align themselves with the forces of evil.
Okay, so we've got these 144,000 sealed for protection. But what about everyone else? What happens to the rest of humanity as these judgments unfold?
Well, that's where those 7 bowls of wrath come in. They represent the final and most devastating outpouring of God's judgment upon the earth. And that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive. Get ready, because it's about to get intense.
All right, so we've gone through those 7 seals and the 4 horsemen.
Right.
That mysterious silence in heaven. The 7 trumpets.
Uh-huh.
That idea of the spirit of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And that choice between the mark of the beast and the seal of God.
Yeah.
Not to mention those 144,000.
A lot going on.
Yeah, sealed for protection. But now we're here at the climax, the 7 bowls of wrath.
Yeah.
This final outpouring of God's judgment.
It's definitely the most intense part of Revelation.
Yeah.
The 7 bowls represent the culmination of God's wrath, the ultimate consequences of humanity's rebellion.
So no more warnings, no more holding back. This is it.
Exactly. It's the point of no return where God's justice is fully unleashed on the world.
All right, I'm ready. Lay it on me. What kind of judgments are we talking about here?
Okay. The first bowl brings painful sores to everyone who bears the mark of the beast.
Ooh.
Remember that mark symbolizes allegiance to the Antichrist and his system.
Right.
This bowl is like divine retribution for choosing to side with evil.
Like a spiritual disease, almost a consequence of aligning yourself with that corrupt power.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Then the second bowl turns the sea into blood, killing all life within it.
We talked about the sea turning to blood earlier.
Right.
And how it represents the corruption of God's creation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what's happening here again?
Yes, but it's even more intense this time. It's a complete destruction of the world's ecosystems. A reminder that rebellion against God ultimately leads to the death of creation itself.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the third bowl?
The third bowl continues this theme of ecological devastation.
Okay.
This time, all the rivers and springs turn to blood as well.
Oh, wow.
So now even the freshwater sources are contaminated, making life unsustainable.
So it's like the world is literally being choked off, deprived of the very things that sustain life.
Right. And then comes the fourth bowl, which unleashes intense heat from the sun, scorching the earth.
It's not just the water then, it's the air we breathe.
Yeah, it's inescapable.
Right.
The fourth bowl represents the relentless judgment and suffering that will come upon the world. A kind of inescapable burning.
Yeah.
That reflects the spiritual heat of God's wrath.
4 bowls down, and it's already incredibly intense. What comes next?
The fifth bowl brings darkness to the beast's kingdom,
Okay.
causing immense pain and anguish.
We talked earlier about that darkness representing spiritual blindness, right?
Right.
So is this like that, but on a physical level?
Exactly. It's a feeling of hopelessness and isolation.
Okay.
A sense of being cut off from the source of light and life.
2 more bowls left. What do they bring?
The sixth bowl dries up the Euphrates River,
Okay.
which prepares the way for the kings of the east to gather for the final battle.
So this bowl is like setting the stage for that ultimate showdown between good and evil.
Precisely. It's the mobilization of forces, the alignment of powers for that final confrontation.
And then the 7th bowl, the final one.
Yeah.
What happens?
The 7th bowl unleashes the most catastrophic earthquake the world has ever seen.
Wow.
It's so powerful that it splits cities, islands, mountains.
It's like the world itself is being torn apart.
Yeah.
It's like a reflection of the spiritual brokenness that has overtaken humanity.
That's a great insight. The 7th bowl symbolizes the complete and utter destruction of the old order.
Okay.
The end of a world that has rejected God and chosen its own path.
So after all these judgments, all this devastation, what happens next?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The video points out that even after experiencing all these bowls of wrath, even as the world crumbles around them, people continue to defy God.
Really?
Yeah, they refuse to repent. They even blaspheme his name.
I find that so fascinating. Even after everything they've witnessed,
Yeah.
they still cling to their rebellion. Why do you think that is?
I think it speaks to the power of deception. The way the spirit of the Antichrist can harden hearts and blind people to the truth, even in the face of overwhelming evidence.
So it's not just about a lack of understanding or knowledge.
Right.
It's about a willful choice to reject God, even when confronted with his power and judgment.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from Revelation. It's not just a story about the future, but a warning about the choices we make in the present.
Yeah.
It's a call to examine our own hearts and align ourselves with God's will before it's too late.
So Revelation isn't just about predicting the end of the world.
No.
But about prompting us to live differently right now.
Exactly.
To choose faith over fear, love over hate, obedience over rebellion.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been an incredible journey through one of the most challenging and thought-provoking books of the Bible.
It has.
What final thought would you leave our listeners with?
I would simply say this. Don't let the dramatic imagery and intense symbolism distract you from the core message of Revelation.
Okay.
It's a book about hope, about God's ultimate victory over evil, and about the promise of a new heaven and a new earth where justice and righteousness will reign.
That's a beautiful and encouraging thought to end on.
It is.
And to you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the book of Revelation.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Remember, the journey of faith is ongoing. Stay curious, keep exploring, and keep seeking truth. We'll see you on the next deep dive.